And here's what India should think about. The threat from China is real and it's not going away. The PLA may or may not have the appetite for war, but there's certainly no hurry to end the border standoff with India. So New Delhi must be prepared for all eventualities. The problem is the war in Ukraine. It is hurting India's preparedness. Supplies from Russia have not been steady, and now reports say Russia is buying back parts of weapons. It is repurchasing tanks and missiles that it exported earlier. A new report was published today. It talks about Russian buybacks. It says Russia is re-importing some military components, mostly parts for tanks and missiles. And what does Moscow plan to do with these? Install them in older weapons and deploy those weapons for the war in Ukraine. Next question. Where is Russia getting these parts from? India and Myanmar, according to reports. Both countries rely heavily on Russian military supplies, and now Russia is relying on them to upgrade its old weapons. There is customs data that refers to some shipments. 2 Russian manufacturers have been named: Ural Wagon Zavod and Russian NPK KBM. These are Russian companies. Apparently, they're buying back parts from India and Myanmar. Now, it is possible that these parts were defective and are being returned. It's possible that they will be replaced. But going by one claim, there were no records of these items being replaced, not until March 2023. So most likely, Russia is just keeping them for now, and it makes sense. Such parts are hard to come by for 2 reasons mainly. 1, the war is exhausting Russia's stocks. And 2, Western sanctions have hit Russia's manufacturing capabilities. Companies cannot find the components they need, so they're looking for alternatives, even breaking down civilian equipment like planes to cannibalize spare parts. So the plan to re-import parts makes sense. Russia's defense industry is under stress, and it has a bearing on countries that depend on Russia, which brings us to India. Defense deliveries to India have been running late. In March, the Indian Air Force made a statement. It said Russia is unable to deliver vital supplies. The Air Force said this to Indian lawmakers. There was a major delivery plan for this year, but the Air Force said it won't happen. It won't happen this year. Now, we don't have the specifics, but most experts agree that this is about the S-400 missile defense system. India has bought 5 of these from Russia. 3 of the systems have been delivered. 2 are awaited. And the IAF statement was telling. It was the first public admission of a shortfall from the Russian side. In the month of March, another report emerged. It said India would now get the pending deliveries by early 2024. Such delays tend to test the relationship. There are outstanding issues like payment for Russian supplies. Moscow recently complained about this. It said it has billions of rupees in Indian banks and nowhere to use them. Let me explain this. India and Russia have a trade mechanism in place, the rupee-ruble system. That is the mechanism. It is used to bypass the US dollar and Western sanctions. You see, Russia has been cut off from the global banking system, so India uses the rupee to buy Russian goods like oil and weapons. This money goes into an Indian bank account in Russia. Similarly, when Russia buys something from India, it pays in the ruble. The problem is that Russia doesn't buy very much from India, so there's a gap. It gets close to 1 billion Indian rupees every month, according to one estimate, and every quarter this pile grows by 2 to 3 billion rupees. But since Moscow is not buying very much from India, it doesn't have a way to spend this cash. The same thing will happen when India gets Russian weapons. The same payment mechanism will be used. India will pay for those weapons in rupees, and Russia will not be able to use those rupees. As both sides try to resolve this, India is also reducing its dependence on Russia. Earlier, 62% of India's defense imports came from Russia. Now this number has dropped to just 45%. India has now shifted to other suppliers, countries like France, which now accounts for 29% of India's defense imports, and the US, which accounts for 11%. And this diversification is a good strategy because India cannot put all its eggs in the Russian basket. Moscow's war should not be allowed to compromise India's war preparedness.